All right. Well, good morning, all. Welcome back to our the continuation of our meeting from July the 8th, 2021, with regard to the airport committee meeting. We last left at 12:08 on July the 8th as part of a recess. So we were on item and just concluding, I believe, item 6.1 and getting ready to move to 6.2. All right. So, okay.
Adam, just to
Brown.
clarify as well, items 9 and 10 have been concluded as well.
Yes, item 9.1, the Rocky Mountain House aerobatic competition request, we did complete that. And 10, we went through the correspondence. Absolutely. Thank you for that clarification. Councillor Hoven.
At the last meeting, or at the beginning part of this meeting on July 8th, there was a resolution, be it resolved that the airport committee require a $2 million insurance as per town and county practice, and for town and county be named as additional insured until the aerobatic policy is approved. As a member of the prevailing side, I would like to rescind this motion entirely, or I move we rescind this motion entirely as per the town of Rocky Mountain House's procedural bylaw under exceptional circumstances. Those exceptional circumstances include that the requirement is not industry standard. The requirement is overly onerous and damaging to our airport community. It is not a mandatory requirement to cover our liabilities, but a recommendation that may be met through other protections. Our municipal liability coverages are typically much higher. Transport Canada does not require this at any airport as far as it is known. And there's been various correspondence from aviators, especially this email looking at the total lost investment in the town of Rocky Mountain House in Clearwater County is estimated at $4.657 million because of that motion. So I would like to move that we rescind that motion because of this new information.
All right, very well. Mr. Kraus, perhaps you can walk us through the process so that we can be assured that we're following process correctly. I know I have taken the opportunity to read the bylaw, but I think I prefer having your guidance.
Yeah, thank you, Chairperson. So a motion to rescind or amend a motion previously adopted shall require 2/3 votes of councillors present at the council meeting at which the rescinding or amending motion is introduced. So that rescinding motion will require 2/3. So in this case, with 5 members being present, it would require 4.
4 of the 5 to rescind it, and is that rescind and amend? Are they lumped together?
Well, if you rescind the motion, then another motion would be put on the table, I would imagine.
Okay. Councillor Brown.
Yes, Madam Chair, I'd like a recorded vote on this, please.
Very well. Recorded vote. Okay, so as you said, it would require 4 to vote in favor to rescind that motion. All right. And does everybody understand? Okay, Councillor Hoven.
After I'd just like to speak for a few more words on this. We have an airport that is active. We have an airport that I believe our vision is that it continue to grow. And we have a group of pilots that want to use our facilities. They want to spend their money in our community, and to not rescind this motion would be extremely damaging to a group that is very beneficial to our area. So I would just ask all the members present to please join with me in rescinding this for the good of the airport.
That makes sense to me, and we can then create a new motion as we go forward. All right, do we understand fully the motion that has been put forward? Does anybody need to hear it again? Councillor Auld?
I don't, I understand the motion. Can you just hit your mic? It just feedbacks. The issue that we had originally with this was that it left the town and county open for liability. I don't understand how we can leave our residents open to this liability if there is an accident out at that airport. If something happens out there, we are definitely going to be named liable. And if, God forbid, somebody is killed in an accident out there, or worst case scenario, 1 million liability is not going to cover anybody for anything. So I don't understand why the insurance is available. I've spoken to the insurance guys, and there is insurance out there for the low aerobatics that they can get. And it's all policy specific, it's pilot specific. I just don't think that anybody should be opening ourselves up to that liability.
Now, I can appreciate the concerns about liability. We do have additional liability. We've looked into it from the county perspective that we have. I still remain that we would need to be named additionally assured on each insured on all of their insurances. That's something that we've heard and seen a number of emails about. The other part of this, I think it allows a couple things to happen. We could look at this information to be more thoroughly looked at by the task force. And in the meantime, get this group of people back in the air, back at our airport, and bringing those dollars and that economic development and activity back to our airport, because right now we've driven it away, and we're asking way more than what apparently Transport Canada does. We've had all that information come to all of us. So I don't know that we are in a position right now to have the information that we really could better put to a group of people who understand that once we get that task force up and running. But in the meantime, that allows us to continue to keep this group operating in our airport and not going elsewhere. And still managing to keep moving this thing forward through some further, I guess, discussions with the folks who actually know this stuff far better than we do. So from my perspective, I think that's part of this. The other part that, we were curious. We asked staff, what are the statistics? And we certainly see that the statistics on accidents in aircraft are way, way lower than they are in driving motor vehicles. And given that, maybe that's why Transport Canada has that lower risk consideration. They're measuring themselves against other activities that are happening. So those are some of the things that come to mind for me. I mean, I'm not going to bore you with statistics, but we did pull them because I was curious. Councillor Hoven.
One of the pilots sent some information, and it showed that he's got 1 million US liability, which is, I don't know what the exchange rate, 1.5 Canadian. And he attempted to get the 2 million Canadian, and he was unable to do so. And that policy he communicated that it's impossible for him to get. So I really, once again, I'm going to ask that we rescind this motion, because we cannot put an expectation on the aerobatics community that they cannot fulfill. Now, maybe there is further information, maybe there's a different policy that pilot can get, but I do not think we want to kill this aerobatics activity at our airport based on faulty information. So I will ask it again. I ask that we rescind this policy, go back to the Transport Canada regulation of 1 million liability, and the task force can investigate this further. They can get all the regulations, and if we need to change the insurance then, after the recommendation of the task force, it can happen then. But I do not think we want to kill activity at the airport. We want to increase activity at the airport.
Councillor Auld.
I 100% agree with you. I would love to see everything going out there, and we're not saying they can't. there are pilots out there at the airport that have the 2 million liability right now. It doesn't seem to be an issue for the other pilots out there. The issue is that they can't get an underwriter to insure them because of the inherent danger of aerobatics. That's the issue. So our insurance at $25 million is not covering the aerobatics out there. It's a high-risk procedure, high-risk activity, and it specifically says in there that it's not covered.
Can we please go back through that letter, insurance letter, and perhaps review that? Because I don't know that it actually says we can't. I think it just indicates it's kind of just a recommendation to my knowledge, or perhaps we should be looking at that one. Mr. Kraus, that might be quite helpful.
Yeah, so thank you, Madam Chair. So I mean, the administration has even reconfirmed with the insurance provider for the town and the county. So under our policy, it is exclusive of any of high-risk activity, which includes aerobatics, air shows, and so forth. So if any, and whether the insurance company has told us, if we allow and permit that activity over our airport, then we are not covered under our insurance. So if something happened, we would not be covered. So they are, well, recommending that the pilots have liability insurance for low-level aerobatics, and that the town and county be additional named insured. Their recommendation was 5 million, as you can see in the letter, which is quite significant. And I think in the board's discussion at the last, or previously in this meeting, was to bring that down to an acceptable level of 2 million, because that's our standard for any other user group of any other facility.
So were they able to provide that in writing to us, that we won't be covered?
Yes, and actually we asked for confirmation yesterday and they sent an email, which I can forward to the committee.
Mr. Kraus, could you?
Oh, Councillor Hoven?
Could you print those up for us right now? Because I don't have my laptop here to read it.
Yes,
Thank you.
You want to
How about we
recess for
take
5
another
minutes?
5
I can go
minutes
my
to
computer.
recess?
Thank you.
That sounds perfect. Thank you. All right. Okay, you let me know when we're going. All right. All right, we are returning from a brief recess to get the emails that was forwarded to Mr. Kraus with regard to airport insurance coverage. Mr. Kraus, now that we have this in front of us, perhaps you could go through this. And my understanding is we've had Ms. Quinlan and join us as well. Whichever would prefer to walk us through what we're looking at, that would be very helpful right about now, because there's a lot of emails back and forth, not a lot, a few, and it would be good to understand the process and how we got to where we're at right now. So I think that would allow us to better understand what our real risk is here.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So Ms. Quinlan was the employee that was in contact and discussions with AUMA on our insurance. So I'll ask her to summarize the conversation in an email.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I was in conversation with Louis Vasquez. He's our representative through AUMA for our insurance. We do have in aviation liability insurance, we have a policy where we carry 25 million liability insurance. And what we were trying to determine was what that covered, so I spoke to him, and during the conversation, and he's getting a copy of the policy for us. It's going to take a few days because he said it's a group policy, so he has to take some references to other municipalities out before they can forward it. But basically what he said is that any high risk activity is not covered under our liability. He also seemed, and I think he said it in the second one, is that basically if someone that's not, part of the town causes or is in an accident, our liability doesn't necessarily cover that. Or our insurance doesn't cover that. It's if someone's flying, irregardless of what they're doing, if they had an accident, our insurance wouldn't be part of their claim. So when I spoke to him, he did say that low-level aerobatics would not be covered. When he sent the email, he does state that it has a stated exclusion for air meets, air races, and any other spectator type of events or activities, and that he was waiting for confirmation from Global Aerospace. So he did say that, it is in our best interest to make sure that anybody flying has insurance, because basically if there was an accident, we would get named, like if they crashed and something happened, we would get named and sued. And he said our insurance may not pick up that as a case. They might say, no, not happening. So you will see that I did send a second email because I wanted to make sure that when they say air meets, et cetera, that included low-level aerobatics. I just wanted to be really clear. And he does say, even though it doesn't specifically mention low-level aerobatics, really what the underwriting intention is to exclude high hazard activities. So that's basically what they told us. And he does state in the second email that the town's aviation liability policy is very clear that any third party operator is not covered. So it's their responsibility to carry their own insurance. So that's the information that I received. And I mean, we're waiting for a copy of the policy. I'm sure it will be interesting reading because sometimes those policies can be quite difficult to read, but that's the information that I received back.
So if I understand you correctly, and please let me know if I'm misunderstanding you. We really don't know because we haven't heard from this global airspace thing. So we're still waiting for that information and confirmation. And let me stop with that question first. We haven't actually heard back from Global yet.
No.
Yeah, so Madam Chair, so basically what it says that we are not covered for any high hazard or high risk activity. So that is clear. Where our liability increases is that we have to give approval to do that. So it's not like a pilot just coming in for a landing. It's that they require the airport approval to do that high risk activity.
Who determines if it's high risk?
Madam Chair, I think even in the email, that they're commenting that it would be regarded as a high risk activity.
Where would I find that?
First paragraph.
Right here? Where, for the July 28th? Is that that first where it says, "Hi Betty. Although the stated exclusion in the policy does not specifically mention low-level aerobatics, the underwriting intention is to exclude high-risk activities." I ask again, who determines high-risk activities? Mr. Kraus, anybody?
No, I think Councillor Auld has answered that. The insurance company is determining it as a high risk.
Mr. Hoven?
I can see how an air show, it says here that they exclude air meets, air races, and other spectator type of events. So, you know, when the Rocky Air Show goes on, that would be excluded from this. But is a pilot lifting off and then practicing by himself in a space, is that a high risk activity? And then landing by himself, because the dangers in the taking off and the landing. But when you're in an airspace by yourself, I assume there's not 4 or 5 aerobatic pilots practicing at the same time, which then would be a high hazard. But someone by themselves flying, I don't see how that is a high hazard.
Councillor Auld?
I think that question Tim has answered, sorry, Councillor Hoven, from Richard Neal, where he says the request for confirmation for low-level aerobatics operation with a 2 million third-party liability currently appears beyond the appetite and capacity of many specialist aviation insurers. Consequently, I anticipate the underwriters will review the request with their legal team in order to determine their ability and capacity to provide the coverage and limits requested. So even the guys that are doing the insurance really don't want anything to do with it. It's got to be a special insurer and it's got to be a special policy. That is right from one of the biggest outfits in Canada, probably the world. So they don't even want to touch it.
What are you referencing, Councillor Auld? Because I'm not sure we have the same information.
Yeah, you do. It's from Neil Cook forwarded it on to us regarding him trying to get his insurance. Says they haven't even got an answer yet from their underwriters, but when they do, they'll contact you. He says, I anticipate the underwriters may request more details regarding operations with regards to SFOC, etc. So the guys that do it don't want to do it because of the high risk that they are going to be taking in insuring these pilots.
So what's the first sentence?
Thank you for the message. The underwriters are reviewing the requirements for liability coverage from the town of Rocky Mountain House. They have not seen similar requirements.
Do you need the little button on? Sorry. Councillor Hoven?
I'm looking, I don't know if I have that email. What was it? Thank you. What was the, my mind's gone blank. Which email was this? What was it called?
This is the one from Mr. Cook, is my understanding.
Yeah.
What date? was that?
Third-party consultant, the Alberta Aerobatics Club, SFOC, third-party, no SFOC. I'm just trying to search the emails I've got from Neil and I don't see that one.
23 the date.
July 14th. Oh yeah, Friday, sorry, yes. July 23rd. We got the email from Mr. Cook. Regarding liability insurance requirements, some Marsh Silver Wings.
So the challenge I have at the moment is we are still, Councillor Brown, I feel like I was reticent in the moment 2 weeks ago when you said we do not have enough information. I feel like we are still grappling with the difficulty of having information here. I feel like we jumped the gun, to be blunt. We have damaged, or at least potentially damaged, I believe we have damaged the viability of our airport, and we have singled out one group. My understanding from the little I know of aerobatics and aircraft maneuvers in total, including large jets coming and going, the biggest risk they have is when they take off and when they land. It is not these other activities. I'm troubled by us trying to solve something. I feel like I've let this committee down in having allowed that motion to go forward in the first place now, to be very blunt. And I guess I'm looking for how do we, Mr. Kraus, find a way forward when we're clearly so divided? Because I feel we simply do not have enough information.
Madam Chair, I mean, to find more information and to go forward, we can get a legal opinion that would take all the information and assess it and bring back a recommendation through that. But right now you do have a motion on the table to rescind the motion.
We do have that on the table, and because we recognize we've had so much more information come in. Councillor Hoven.
So just a question. So there is a low-level aerobatic third-party personal liability insurance, and that is separate from just general liability insurance? Because I'm hearing, Dave made the comment that some people have the $2 million liability. Now, is that just general liability? Some pilots have the 2 million general liability and that anyone can get, but our aerobatics community is trying to get 2 million low-level aerobatic third-party personal liability insurance, and that insurance is not available. So does just having 2 million in general liability meet the requirement of the motion then?
No.
It doesn't, the motion doesn't say what type of insurance, just says $2 million.
But in their policy, it'll have to state that it's covering the aerobatics. If they're doing aerobatics and don't have the coverage and there's an accident, then it's not going to cover.
But if they cannot get, if that product is not available, how can we expect someone to provide us with proof of something that does not exist?
It's not that it's not available. It's just they got to jump through some hoops.
But I have it here from Mr. Cook.
Well,
$2 million low-level aerobatic third-party personal liability insurance is not available.
right from Richard Neal from Marsh. He's still waiting from the underwriters to contact him with the details.
So it's not available. How can we expect, how can we put a demand on a member of the community that's literally impossible to fulfill?
That's quite different from my conversation with him. He said there are definitely underwriters out there that do it. He said it's expensive and it's time consuming, but he said there are underwriters that will provide it.
Well, I guess the next question would be why do we demand something that's overly expensive and hard to get if it is available when no other airport across Canada demands that?
I would say we're protecting our residents. If the insurance companies are not going to insure the activity, it falls on us to cover that liability. When something happens, then our residents are on the hook to pay for it, and insurance is not.
I would think that the Transport Canada requirement of 1 million liability for low-level aerobatics then should be enough, because I would hope that Transport Canada has all the relevant information when they're making a decision about what level of insurance is required.
Councillor
Madam Chair,
Brown.
Transport Canada requirements are the minimum requirements.
So that is the requirement then.
The minimum requirement as risk goes up, everything else goes up.
Yeah, that 1 million, that's for all pilots. It's not specific for the aerobatics. Every pilot has to have that $1 million. From my understanding.
Is it not the expectation of Transport Canada, who puts together the approvals for the SFOC? Is it not their, I guess they're the deciding party. They are the enforcement group. I don't understand how, how we are trying to write rules above a federal enforcement agency who writes that piece of legislation, who is in charge of that piece of legislation. I feel like we're overreaching. Oh, Mr. Wadden, you've joined our meeting.
Yep, I'm here.
Okay. Thank you. I guess where I can bring you up to speed, we have a motion on the floor. We're re-looking at item 6.1, low-level aerobatic practice policy, and having to do with the insurance recommendation. And Councillor Hoven has put a motion on the floor to rescind that particular motion so that we can find a better way forward, is I guess my words for his motion. Perhaps it would be best if you could hear the motion read out one more time. If you don't mind, thank you.
So I have a motion made by Councillor Hoven to rescind motion 6.1. Be it resolved that the airport committee rescind motion 6.1, that the airport committee require $2 million insurance as per town and county practice, and for town and county to be named as additional insured until the aerobatic policy is approved.
So do you fully understand the motion on the floor, Mr. Wadden?
Yeah, I do. I've heard it and clearly and understand what's been said. Yes.
All right. Are there any other comments or questions? Councillor Hoven?
The question I have is the $2 million insurance mentioned in the motion, is it just general liability? Or is it, I'll get the low-level aerobatic third-party personal liability insurance? That's a key question.
It is key, and it appears targeted, and I fear for us targeting one group and not just looking at that across all pilots at this point. So that might be something specific to consider. Mr. Kraus, perhaps you could provide us some clarity.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the motion that was passed by the board was be resolved that the airport committee require $2 million insurance as per town and county practice, and for town and county to be named as additional insured until the aerobatic policy is approved.
So is the town and county practice just 2 million general liability?
Mr. Kraus, and I guess I'll look to Mr. Reed if you could provide us some clarity.
Wait till Mr. Kraus weighs in.
Okay, Mr. Kraus?
So typically when we were required to be additional named insured, the insurance policy is specific to the activity that's being done, be it hockey, swimming, so forth.
So is there a policy that states that somewhere for the town of Rocky Mountain House?
I don't have the policy in front of me, but the town does have an insurance policy for the requirements of insurance.
I do have a policy.
Councillor Ald?
I do have a copy of the policy in front of me. Town organized programs, courses, special events, et cetera, to be covered under the town's insurance policy. Casual user activities, non-alcohol that do not require additional insurance coverage include conferences, conference tournaments, funerals, showers, yada, yada, yada. Low-level risks do not require additional insurance, such as mom and me meetings like Tops, Rocky Motocross. Regular scheduled facility users are required to obtain their own liability insurance in the amount of $2 million, with the town of Rocky Mountain House named as additional insured. Examples include Barracuda Swim Club, Rocky Minor Hockey, Rocky Figure Skating, Rams Hockey, Rocky Speed Club, Bunch Ladies Hockey, Old Timers Hockey, Church League Hockey, or Rocky Minor Ball, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All these people have to have $2 million insurance, with us named as additionally insured.
So that's liability insurance,
General liability insurance.
That's right.
but it's not specific to aerobatics. It's just liability insurance.
Sure.
So it seems like we've inadvertently targeted something that perhaps is outside of the policy.
Which is not covered by our insurance policy, so we need to have something that covers us.
I feel like we're working beyond what the policy that that the managing partner has. I guess that's my point. I don't want to see us inadvertently targeting a group and inadvertently shutting them down because we're working outside of the current policy that our managing partner has. And
Madam-
maybe I'm misinterpreting it, but I certainly enjoy the clarification as to why we would target one group.
Yeah, Madam Chair. So yeah, I think it's a little bit of splitting of hairs there. So the insurance that hockey provides us is for the activity of hockey under their insurance. So if minor hockey wanted to do something different, like fireworks outside, then they would have to obtain different insurance, for example. But it's specific to the activity that they're doing.
Again, it looks like it's something around the process of where many people are in an area, and we're talking about one pilot in a plane. Councillor Hoven.
I think also if it is not the general liability insurance, then, and it is only the low-level aerobatics third party, then we are asking the aerobatic community to get a product that is not available. So it's impossible for them to fulfill. Whereas if it's just 2 million general liability, that is perhaps something the aerobatics community could look at, just 2 million liability on their aircraft.
Okay. Councillor Brown.
Just to remind Councillor Hoven that through the chair that Councillor Auld has already stated, it's not that it's impossible, it's just difficult and perhaps involves a little more detail. So I leave it at that.
Councillor Auld, perhaps you could remind us how it is not impossible. It's just the difficult. Clearly, you've spoken to somebody, and I would like to better understand what you understand.
Okay, going back to the email from Richard Neal, he says they've sent off the application to the different underwriters. They haven't got a response back yet. They're still waiting on details. When I spoke to him personally, he said there are underwriters out there that will insure low-level aerobatics.
Who is Richard Neal?
He is with Marsh Canada Limited, the Assistant Vice President for Aerospace and Aviation.
So Madam Chair, just for clarification, we're following the advice of our insurance. So if we go to page 130 with a letter from them, what they're recommending is third parties to evidence aviation liability coverage specifically for low-level aerobatics. And their suggestion is 5 million. So
Oh, thank you, Ms. Button. Mr. Wadden, we see your hand is up.
Yeah, I believe Neil Cook is there at the meeting, and he would be able to address directly if the general insurance that Councillor Hoven is talking about is possible or not. They've done a lot of research on the insurance, and I'd just like to add as a side note, that no other airport in Alberta is requesting special insurance for a specific group or an aerobatics group to perform or to practice at an airport.
Thank you for that reminder. I do recognize that it would have to be at the discretion of this committee of whether we would have Mr. Cook speak to that. So we could have a vote on if we want to do that, or in the meantime, I do see Councillor Hoven's light on.
Just reading the email from Richard Neal. The request for confirmation for low-level aerobatic operations with the 2 million third-party liability limit currently, here's the important part, currently appears beyond the appetite and capacity of many specialist aviation insurers, which to me says it is not available if it's beyond their capacity. So once again, this motion is asking our aerobatics community to to purchase a product that at this time does not exist.
Mr. Wadden?
Yeah, it seems that there's a possibility to get the general insurance coverage, but not specific for aerobatics. So that's something, like I said, that we can take back to the aerobatics club to see that if that's doable. But still, in the meantime, it's creating a problem with them. So I agree on Mr. Hoven's motion there originally when I logged in here.
All right, Mr. Brown, I noted, or Councillor Brown, my apologies.
I'm good, thanks.
All right, is there any other discussion with regard to the motion on the table? Councillor Hoven.
In light of this discussion, I think it is crystal clear that we did not have all the information required to make a sound decision when this motion was passed 2 weeks ago. We've got this information now. We've got an email from Richard Neal that says the $2 million third-party liability limit is outside the capacity of the aviation insurers. And therefore, we are putting a requirement on the aerobatics community that is impossible for them to fulfill. So I once again ask my fellow committee members to vote with me in rescinding that motion.
Very well. Any other last minute conversations or comments? If none, and I will remind you, Councillor Brown has asked for a recorded vote. So those in favor of rescinding. Now I'm just going to, for those who are viewing, because we've got this, that is myself, Councillor Hoven, Rick Moore, thank you, and Mr. Wadden. That's in favor. Those opposed? That is 2. That is Councillor Brown and Councillor Ald. Mr. Kraus, to be clear, does that meet the requirement of the 2/3?
Yes, it does.
Okay. All right, so that means that we now have to make other decisions, other motions with regard to this. I would recommend at this point, given the amount, we've spent about an hour already this morning trying to ensure we understand, which clearly there's a number of items that we've tried to understand. Perhaps this is an item that needs to come back with more clarity, more information. And I would suggest be put to the task force that we're trying to create and have them bring back a recommendation as the stakeholders and the folks who understand this best. Those are some of my initial thoughts on how we best move this forward. Councillor Hoven, I noted you had your light on.
I was going to make a motion that this question of insurance or the required insurance be sent to the task force to prepare a report and then come back to this committee.
Counselor Ald.
Just with the fact that this task force, I think, is going to be a little onerous to get off the ground, I would suggest that administration takes it to legal, take it to our insurance, and let administration get that on the ball ASAP. So we're not waiting for the committee to be formed. I would like to see both administrations take it and let's get some answers ASAP.
Yes, I agree, Counselor Ald. I think that it's important that we seek legal as this is something that we are trying to ensure is managed through our managing partner. I would assume that that should be done through the managing partner's legal on our behalf to find out where our risks are and any other nuances that we don't fully understand at this committee level. So I see potentially two motions. One that Counselor Hoven appears to be considering and presenting, and Counselor Ald, one with regard to some legal. So let's deal with the first one, Counselor Hoven, because we need to ensure a path forward here.
I would move that the question of insurance requirements be sent I move that the question of required insurance be investigated by the task force and then reported back to this committee.
Counselor Ald.
I just have a concern because there isn't a task force yet. So there's the aerobatics haven't come up with a committee member. The Rocky Flying Club has not. Nobody else has come up with any members for this committee. So we're asking something that doesn't exist yet to look into it.
Perhaps we can come to that in a moment, because I think there's some hiccups with the task force as well, based on additional information. So I think that that's going to become another discussion point yet this morning. Because I agree, it's hard for them to do that when we don't have it and we don't have a process for choosing them. So I think that that is another nuance that we will have to address yet this morning. Counselor Hoven.
No.
Okay. Counselor, Mr. Wadden, were you able to hear the motion?
Yes, if I could get that repeated one more time, please.
The motion is be it resolved that the airport committee bring forward the question of required insurance, be investigated by the task force and be brought back to the airport committee for information.
Okay, I have heard and understood the motion.
Any other questions or comments? Those in favor? That is 4. Those opposed to 2. Counselor Ald, as I recall, you had an interest in a motion so that we could get some additional legal information. Perhaps you could formulate that motion for us.
Okay.
Oh, Counselor Brown.
Yeah, I would like to move that the managing partner seek legal opinion on the matter of airport insurance prior to commencement of any task force. Do you require a date to have that complete by Mr. Kraus?
No. Principal.
To be presented at a later date, later
Meeting.
meeting, yeah. Thank you.
All right. Any questions or comments? Counselor Hoven?
Just on the timing, so the motion is that we get a legal opinion before the task force does anything? Okay, I'm just wondering if we need the time limit, because the task force will be, it's a minimum probably a month away, and I'm sure Mr. Kraus will be getting that information quickly from I don't want the task force to be stalled. I think we need to move forward on that as fast as we can, and I don't want it to have to be delayed while we're waiting for the next airport commission meeting or for legal.
Would it be helpful if we picked a date then for the next airport commission meeting? Say mid-August.
So Madam Chair, I think probably the fastest procedure is administration get in contact with legal this afternoon. I don't know what their timelines
Yeah.
are, but once we have the legal opinion, we can email that to the committee.
Counselor Hovind.
What was the motion again? If we could just have it read back.
Be it resolved that the airport committee instruct administration to the managing partner to seek legal opinion on insurance and bring back to the airport committee at a later date, or to email. It depends on what the committee at a later date. Okay.
Should we say via email or do we need to be that specific? Not really. We should be fine.
I'm okay.
Okay. Mr. Brown or Councillor Brown? Any other questions or comments? Those in favor? That is carried unanimously. Is there anything that we need to do to ensure that the business of low-level aerobatic practice can continue at our airport? Perhaps Mr. Kraus or Mr. Lindsay could assist us with how we can find a positive path forward for these airport users, because I don't want them going away anymore. I want them using our airport and spending their money here in Rocky Mountain House in Clearwater County. That's what I want, a viable airport. Mr. Kraus.
No, Madam Chair, I think administration is looking to the board for direction on that. If we receive a request tomorrow for low-level aerobatic practice on Saturday, what are we to require?
All right. So what I believe is the industry standard, and I'm happy to be corrected by Mr. Lindsay, is that if they're doing and conducting these practices, they have to have permission from Transport Canada through a special flight operations certificate, SFOC. And they have to then also get permission from our airport supervisor, and that would be yourself. Is there any, and I understand that we have asked and we would like to be named additionally insured on their insurance. Is there any other things they need to do to ensure from you that they would be able to fly? Perhaps, Mr. Lindsay, you're the expert in the room. You're the one who's got to give them the check mark to go.
Well, I guess we're gonna have to require them to have the adjacent landowner's permission as well. And they have to be insured for the activity being taking place. Do we know for sure that the general liability covers aerobatics?
They wouldn't be able to get an SFOC if they didn't have appropriate insurance. Is that not my understanding? And this is where the struggle happens for me. And I don't want to see our airport supervisor struggling with this either. I think that who are we to set additional expectations above what Transport Canada, at least in the interim, that would seem like the reasonable way forward is, yes, we're seeking legal. Yes, we're going to ask the folks who use the airport, and we're in checking with insurance, and we're doing all these things. But in the meantime, is it not reasonable that we simply follow what Transport Canada does?
Madam Chair, I don't believe, I could be wrong, but I don't believe Transport Canada requests a copy of the insurance to issue the SFOC.
Okay.
Like,
Mr. Lindsay, or does that work for you? I guess I'm looking for your guidance, sir. We're going to get you to earn your money today.
Well, I don't really want any liability placed upon the airport for activities that may or may not be insured, is my opinion.
Well, if they're insured and Transport Canada has already signed them off, how is that a liability to us?
Madam Chair, I think the easiest way would be if they have the $1 million general liability insurance that they provide it, and also a statement from their insurance company that this does cover their low-level aerobatic activity.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Wadden. Thank you. You're probably the best to help us with that being a pilot.
Under the CARS with Transport Canada, you cannot fly an aircraft in Canadian airspace without it being properly insured, period.
Okay. That seems pretty straightforward to me. Counselor Alt.
Okay, so if we have the additionally named insurance, have them provide a copy of their insurance policy, so we have it on file. We have the adjacent landowner's permission and the airport permission, then they can fly. That's what I'm seeing.
That's what I'm hearing. Mr. Wadden?
The adjacent landowner's permission does not apply to Crown land.
It would apply to the leaseholder, but it not.
Would it apply to the leaseholder?
The leaseholders are not specified in the CARS.
It's not specified.
But the
Okay.
leaseholder has control over that land.
The
Ooh,
leaseholder does not have control of the airspace over the land,
No,
period. Period.
but neither does a resident.
No.
You're right.
And nowhere does it state that you need the permission from a leaseholder for Crown land.
Okay.
You show me in the CARS where it says we need permission over provincial or government land from a leaseholder in the CARS.
And you're saying it does not exist.
That's correct.
Okay, so that's pretty clear then. Very
And
well. So-
why does the town require documentation over land that they don't own or have any jurisdiction over?
That's a good point. Why is that?
So madam, it's just doing due diligence. If you're going to allow it over the airport and knowing that the activity is going to go onto the adjacent land, you do your due diligence. It's like the due diligence ensuring that the adjacent landowner is okay with it also. It's no different than any other activity the municipality does on rezoning. You send letters to the adjacent landowners. This is what we're doing. Are you okay with it? I mean, it's just doing the due diligence as a municipality.
And that's up to the leaseholder to determine that with the Aerobatics Club, not the town of Rocky Mountain House. We're getting into red tape here.
I'm curious, do we have letters of permission at either end of the runway from those landowners for takeoff and landing?
Madam Chair, I mean, that's a different situation.
How?
Because CARS requires the approval of it for low-level aerobatics. It's specific to that activity.
Okay, so if we're meeting cars, I think that Councillor Auld indicated there's literally only three things I think that we need. We're now debating whether we need to see a copy of whatever permissions from outside of our jurisdiction. So I guess let's go over the list of things we need. Mr. Wadden, thank you.
That's up to those that are performing aerobatics or low-level aerobatics. They know specifically in their FSOC who they have to contact and who they have to get permission with. This is the town or the airport here overstepping their bounds, and it's none of the town's business whether the aerobatics club has approval from adjacent landowners. That's Transport Canada's business with that landowner and those performing low-level aerobatics.
Okay, so with that additional information and clarity, let's go over the list of things we need so that Mr. Lindsay can get on with the business of approving this activity. What do we need? We said we need to see a copy of their SFOC, correct? Okay. I'm going by you, Mr. Councillor Auld, because you to help me.
It's right in, it's in their SFOC, what they have to require.
Oh, so just follow the SFOC. The only thing left then is, well, let's finish that thought, one thought at a time. Follow the SFOC is what I hear. So do we need to make a motion to that effect then? To follow our managing partner is asking for direction. And we're going to provide it today because they deserve nothing less. Because if I were the airport manager, I would want that direction at this point because there's been a lot of controversy, let's call it that. So a motion that states follow the SFOC. Is that, Mr. Wadden, will that work as a motion? You're a pilot. Does that make sense?
Let me think on this here for a bit. We'll go around the room, and if anybody else has any other questions or comment.
Councillor Ald.
Mr. Cook's provided a copy of his SFOC and it states all the conditions. Prior to conducting the aerobatic maneuvers, where the operation is to take place at the airport or aerodrome, the airport manager has to be made aware and has no objections. Where the operations take place over private property, the landowners or tenants have been aware and have no objection. The site of operation not located in the vicinity of noise sensitive areas and residential. So as long as we're insured and they're following the SFOC.
Okay. Any other thoughts? Mr. Wadden?
Yeah, we just have to follow the SFOC, and I'd like to just remind everybody of item 3 in the airport agreement, is that let's not get confused here with the term airport supervisor, airport manager, or airport owner operator. So we decide here in this commission what is going to take place at the airport.
Okay, and I think I have a path forward on that. So we're looking for a motion, perhaps. Councillor Ald, you were able to find that information. Are you comfortable making the motion about following the SFOC?
With the insurance included.
That's on the SFOC, is it not?
Well, the SFOC don't indicate anything about insurance.
Well, they can't get one without insurance, is my understanding.
Right, so we just need to make sure we have a copy of that insurance on file that we're covered. And third party
Is that a
liability.
FOIPable thing? I think is all we would need is to be additionally named insured.
For that activity.
Yeah, so Madam Chair, that would be a certificate of insurance showing the town and county as additional named insured.
Okay. All right, that seems appropriate. Is that the motion that you're comfortable with, Councillor Ald?
Yes.
Mr. Wadden, do you have anything to add, or would you like to? I know I'm going to need to hear the motion read back. Perhaps that's a good spot to start.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
let's-
I've got, be it resolved that the airport committee instruct the managing partner to accept the requirements listed under the SFOC, including certificate of insurance showing the town and county as additional insured, to allow the Aerobatics Club to continue to fly at the Rocky Mountain House Airport. Or practice at the Rocky Mountain House Airport.
Thank you. Mr. Wadden?
The only other thing that I would add to that is effective immediately.
Okay. I think I'll ask Mr. Ald if you would consider that a friendly amendment.
Once everything is provided,
Yes, I think,
once they get us the information and everything is met, then we allow them to continue.
so are we good with that? If we are, I'm going to call the question. Those in favor? That is carried unanimously. All right, there's one point on this FSOC, and we seem to be delineating between it. And Councillor Ald, you brought it to my attention when you were saying that they need permission of the landowner. We're the landowner, the county and the town together. I believe we need a motion from us as the landowner saying that we give permission to this activity, given the previous motion. Does that not make sense, Mr. Kraus?
Madam Chair, I think you just did with the last motion.
Well, I want to be very specific here because I don't want to have, I'm very specific because we don't want to have Mr. Lindsay feeling that he's caught and isn't sure if we completely support this.
In the essence of time, we just did that with that motion.
Did
Once they provide the information, we've given them permission. We just
Okay.
voted on it.
Okay, if we're comfortable with that, I just want to make crystal clear. So I guess for the folks who are listening, and we know that they're listening, Mr. Lindsay, could you perhaps provide a little bit of an idea of how they'll be able to get that permission from you? How do they get a hold of you? What are you looking for?
I'm available 24 hours a day, basically by phone, text, or whatever. Once I get the permission from, well, get the insurance copies from them, I think we're sure set to go forward with this and get permission to fly
And how much notice do you need?
immediately, basically, once I get the information.
So they could phone you up and an hour later be in the air.
With the insurance certificate and everything, yes.
All right, that is good news, Mr. Wad.
I think the copy of insurance should be, so what we're looking at here is we want a copy of insurance that shows the town and the county named insured. Is that correct?
Mr. Kraus, is that correct?
Yes, so the certificate of insurance would have the town and county as additional insured.
Okay, perfect. So when they have the named insured added, they should email that to everybody here on the airport commission and email it to Mr. Lindsay so that we all have a copy so that there's no confusion. And then once that hard copy is in everybody's hands, then Aerobags can continue for that specific SFOC holder.
Okay, Counselor Alt.
Now, this is also all dependent on whether or not what the information we get back from legal and our insurance companies, correct?
No, this means we're ready to go now.
But if
And
legal
if we,
comes back and says that we are not covered and we are not to be operating legally, we need to follow that. I'm gonna say legal, we need to follow that legal advice.
absolutely. So when we have another meeting, we'll be happy to hear that information. Because at that point, that
We're-
would be
we're
new
getting that-
information.
We're getting that emailed today, so if we, well, next, he's gonna look in, administration's gonna look into it shortly. So if it comes back next week and says, no, you guys are not covered, no, you can't, should not be doing this,
Then my understanding would be the process would be, we would come back to this commission, be given the additional information and have the opportunity to have the discussion. I think that's the reasonable way forward. Would it not be, Mr. Kraus?
Madam Chair, so if legal comes back and say, hey, what you're doing is illegal, administration will stop it right away. I'm not anticipating that, but I'm just making the board aware, like administratively, I cannot proceed if something is illegal.
Okay, Mr. Wadden, I see you waving.
Yeah, so who determines what is illegal or not? We're talking about the cars. All the compliance with the cars through the FSOC is done. There's absolutely nothing that is illegal that your lawyers are going to come back with. These are approved flight operations by Transport Canada. So illegal is a non-event.
Thank you for reassuring us. I believe Mr. Kraus indicated he did not anticipate it would come back that way. So if we're following cars, we're good to go. That's what I'm hearing. And we're just doing our due diligence
exactly.
and making sure that we are good to go. And we're making sure that Mr. Lindsay has a positive path forward for this particular user group, and we've given adequate direction from this committee. I think we're good. Have we, is there anything more we'd like to discuss on low-level aerobatic practice policy? Anything more there? I do note on 6.1.2, the formation of the task force. I can see that that is a hiccup. We've had a number of emails on that as well now, including the Rocky Flying Club indicating they have they've declined. So I think we need to go back and look at that. Mr. Wadden, I see you indicating you have something to share.
Yeah, I'll be more than happy to volunteer to be part of that task force.
All right, I think it's more a matter of perhaps even process. Councillor Hoven?
I think we should amend the motion and say instead of the Rocky Mountain House Flying Club, we could choose 2 members of the Rocky Mountain House Airport General Aviation Community, whether as active pilots and or airport hangar leaseholders at the Rocky Mountain House Airport. And administration could come back with a process to choose those people. And then we would get volunteers from the community.
So a couple things are happening here. It looks like we need to relook at the last motion that was made and perhaps amend it to be more inclusive so that we get all those stakeholders and we cast that net a little wider. We were a little too specific by the looks of it, and I certainly don't want to inadvertently miss a stakeholder who would like to be, involved in this. So let's deal with that first. So, Mr. Hoven, Councillor Hoven, did you have something in mind?
Yes, I move we amend resolution 6.1.2 in light of the Rocky Flying Club declining to be involved. And what I asked that we amend the motion to be it resolved that the airport committee direct administration to work with the task force represented by 2 members of the Rocky Mountain House Airport Aerobatics community and by 2 members of the Rocky Mountain House Airport General Aviation community, whether as active pilots and or airport hangar leaseholders at Rocky Mountain House Airport, to be determined by the committee after a selection process coordinated by administration and presented to the committee for approval, to present a low-level aerobatic practice policy back to the airport committee.
Cole, that was a long one.
That was a long one.
I would require that to be read back, please.
How about I just get you a piece of
Yeah,
paper?
that would be great. Thank you.
So Madam Chair, I'd like to ask a question on the proposed motion for Councillor Hoven. So my understanding is its administration has come up to a procedure, bring the procedure back to the committee and then implement the procedure to get the, to me, for administrative, Mr. Lindsay just drafts a letter, sends it out to all the stakeholders asking for interest and brings it back. Or it puts a poster up in the terminal building or, to contact the users.
So while we're waiting for that to be entered, so the process would then become Mr. Lindsay drafts a letter on behalf of our commission and managing partner looking for interest. A number of applicants would send their letters in. And then those would be presented to our commission so that we can choose from that group.
That sounds acceptable to me.
Okay, I think it seems like an appropriate process. Councillor Brown.
Just want some clarity, Madam Chair. We're talking about an administrative process here as opposed to a motion.
Yes, at the moment, it was sort of while we were waiting for administration to catch up on the motion at hand before we have her read that back, because it was quite a long one. Then I just thought while we're waiting for that, we could talk about process so that we clearly understand what that process is.
But I think Mr. Kraus proposed a change to the motion to make it faster.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
right? So instead of, and I don't have the motion in front of me now. So Mr. Lindsay would just send an email out, look for interest, and then those names would be brought here to this committee for selection. Instead of having, we just skipped a step, we just defined the process instead of you bringing it back.
So how do we do that friendly amendment
I
to
have
your?
to see the motion that I made
Okay.
before I can propose an amendment.
Well, while that's happening, is it worth a 5-minute recess while we do that? But now we've lost our lady in charge of live streaming or not, so.
Yeah, so Madam Chair, I mean, I think the motion just needs to be amended that administration engage stakeholders for interest for the
Yep.
task force.
That sounds good.
That works. We're about reducing that, the many steps here, so streamline this. How do we, and I guess, Mr. Lindsay, I mean, you've had a little bit of time while we're waiting here just a little bit. Oh, there it comes. Do we know who all we've got to send this out to? You've had a little bit of time getting to know everybody at the airport.
Well, we have a list of leaseholders at the airport. We just mail that off to, we have all their addresses on file.
Okay,
I think just asking a general question.
Yeah.
How you're making out.
Oh, I'm sorry. I've met quite a few of them, yes.
good. Yes, thank you. Okay, Counselor Hoven.
I'm just trying to shorten the wording of this longly worded motion.
Do you need a few minutes and would a recess be
2
helpful?
seconds.
Why don't we take a 5-minute recess? Let's do that. That'll give you a moment to shorten up that thing. Thank you. All right, we'll be resuming. It was a good opportunity for Councillor Hoven to review his motion and make friendly amendments to it. So it better reflects what our goal is.
Well, during the break and in discussions with administration and could I just have the new motion read back?
Yes, I'd be happy to do that.
Thank you.
So it's a motion to amend motion 6.1.2. Be it resolved that the airport committee direct administration to work with a task force represented by 2 members of the Rocky Mountain House Airport Aerobatics community and by 2 members of the Rocky Mountain House Airport General Aviation community, whether as active pilots and or airport hangar leaseholders at the Rocky Mountain House Airport, to be determined by the committee after an approval process coordinated by administration, engaging stakeholders for interest, to present a low-level aerobatics practice policy back to the airport committee.
That's a lot.
So all it was, we removed 6 words. Sorry, 7 words.
So thank you. As part of that, where does it say that the listing of individuals who show interest comes back to our committee for review and selection? Where does that state that?
To be determined by the committee.
Oh, okay. What part is being determined? The commission? Or
The 4
task
members
force?
of the task force to work with Mr. Lindsay.
Okay. All right, so
Oh, is Mr. Lindsay a member of the task force? No, it'd be a 4-member task force working with Mr. Lindsay.
yes.
Okay.
Mr. Wadden, were you able to hear that amended motion from Councillor Hoven? It was a long one.
Yeah, it was. If we could get that one more time.
Oh, my goodness. Could you read it one more time, please?
Absolutely. Be it resolved that the airport committee direct administration to work with a task force represented by 2 members of the Rocky Mountain House Airport Aerobatics community and by 2 members of the Rocky Mountain House Airport General Aviation community, whether as active pilots and or airport hangar leaseholders at the Rocky Mountain House Airport, to be determined by the committee after an approval process coordinated by administration, engaging stakeholders for interest, to present a low-level aerobatic practice policy back to the airport committee.
Okay, so we should add in there businesses at the airport. They have a lot at stake here. So they should be part of this this opportunity to be part of this group or throw their hat in the ring for this group.
Oh, perhaps there's a quicker way. If we simply rescind the last motion, I think we could build something shorter, perhaps. Something that would include 2 members of the Rocky Mountain House Airport Airport Aerobatics community and 2 members of the Rocky Mountain House General Aviation Committee.
Community.
Community, community. And that's already in there, is it not?
That is in the motion now.
Okay,
That is in the motion now. And Kyle, where it says whether it's active pilots and or airport hangar leaseholders, does that meet your concern for the business owners?
No, because you have a commercial operator on the airport and you have a fuel business on the airport. So, and they also own aircraft. So they've got the biggest, some of the biggest stakes in this as well, right?
Wouldn't they fit as either an active pilot or a leaseholder? Because aren't all the businesses out there leaseholders?
Yeah, just as long as we've got it clarified here that we're considering all the businesses out there leaseholders. even though they might not own a hangar. So that includes Alberta Forest Service as well.
Well, let's just remove the word hangar then.
Okay,
Active pilots and or airport leaseholders.
that works for me.
I have one question. What about the Air Show Society? Do they fit in the general aviation community?
Would they be a pilot?
They,
Anyone who's a pilot,
They-
because it says active pilots, could
some
volunteer
are,
to Mr. Lindsay.
some are just friendly to that particular event.
Yeah,
So,
there's a lot of people working behind the scenes that that are running the Air Show Society that are not pilots.
so does that cover it with the general aviation community? Councillor Brown?
Madam Chair, I thought we were attempting to keep this a simple process by including every dog in the, everybody in the neighborhood and their dog. We're just overcomplicating this.
Well, is this not a community airport, Randy?
I think that's what we are all trying to achieve, that goal. Councillor Hoven, have we captured your motion in its entirety and intent? Maybe we don't have a copy of whatever you have.
Okay, so how about if we just add another word, whether it's active pilots, airport hangar leaseholders, or other stakeholders at the Rocky Mountain House Airport. And then anyone who's interested and has a knowledge of the topic can apply. And then it's up for this committee to decide.
Okay. Were we able to capture those amendments? Gosh, you know what's coming. We're going to ask you to read it. I'm hoping this is the last time that this poor lady has to read this again, but we'll give it a college try.
All right, no
Thank
problem
you.
at all. Be it resolved that the airport committee direct administration to work with a task force represented by 2 members of the Rocky Mountain House Airport Aerobatics community and by 2 members of the Rocky Mountain House Airport General Aviation community, whether as active pilots and or airport leaseholders or other stakeholders at the Rocky Mountain House Airport, to be determined by the committee after an approval process coordinated by administration, engaging stakeholders for interest, and to present a low-level aerobatic practice policy back to the airport committee.
It should be selection process, not approval process.
Okay,
Okay, any other questions? Do we all understand the motion? We've certainly tweaked it lots. Those in favor? Yay, we tweaked it enough. It's unanimous. It's carried. All right. That should conclude anything with regard to the formation of the task force. That should bring us then on to, oops, sorry. No other questions? Oh, sorry. Mr. Wadden.
Mr. Wadden, please unmute your mic.
Thank you for the reminder of some of my best stuff. So are we just wrapping up 6.1 here now? Or is there still more to go on 6.1 here?
I guess I'll look to the rest of the commission. I don't believe there's anything more on 6.1, which would then take us to 6.2, airport lease procedures.
Okay, so I'd just like to make sure we're all clear here as we wrap up 6.1, that once the airport commission members and Mr. Lindsay have a copy of the insurance with the mutually named insured, those that have submitted the paperwork and have a valid SFOC, that they can commence aerobatics immediately once that documentation is provided to us.
Yes, we've resolved that, and we have a path forward on the future task force that can help us with the procedures. So that then takes us to the airport lease procedure, 6.2. I'm hoping everybody has a copy of that so we can move to that. Again, I thank staff and our committee. This is hard work, but we're getting it done. So thank you for your time and patience. 6.2, perhaps, Mr. Kraus, you could lead us through what we're looking at here.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So in our last meeting, the board asked administration to bring back the procedure for approving of leases. So administration has drafted a procedure for the board to consider. To quickly run through the draft procedure, if you go to page 134, which is the draft. Item 1, the Airport Commission shall annually review lease rates and provide recommendations to the councils of Clearwater County and the town of Rocky Mountain House. And that's just for budgeting purposes and for moving forward. Number 2, the Airport Commission shall approve a template lease agreement to provide a consistent and equitable agreement for all leaseholders. The lease for the province of Alberta shall be separate and distinct for the purposes of the fire base. So the board would approve a template lease, and actually this board already has 2 years ago, and that template lease is actually in part of your package. So administration shall use the template to renew any leases, so that if the new lease just follows the template, then it can be done just administratively to speed things up versus waiting for the next Airport Commission meeting. Number 4, any lease that requires a major change and does not keep with the intent of the template lease for a hangar or associated operations will be brought back to the commission for their consideration and direction. Example of it's not a hangar and air use, be it a car rental or a restaurant, then that would come back to the commission for consideration. And then number 5 of it, the signing authority for the lease shall be the town, and that's in accordance to section 7 of the airport agreement.
All right. Couple thoughts come to mind with this particular one. Given the conversations we had earlier in this meeting from 2 weeks ago, we had a number of things brought forward by one of the leaseholders, and it would appear to me that it is way different than the one that is our sample approved one that we had back in 2019 that we said would be kind of the template. Perhaps they should also be listed, that one, the fuel site, as I recall, K2 fuels, I believe they are. Any rate, perhaps that should be listed as the same as being except the ag forestry. Maybe they should be listed as that in there too, because there's no hanger, it's different. I guess I'm speaking to the rest of my committee members. On item number 2, we indicate that we would be, the lease for the province of Alberta shall be separate and distinct lease for the purposes of fire base. Perhaps we need to also list in there, the fuel one needs to be separate and distinct and different from, because we saw it in the previous meeting.
Yeah.
Part of the earlier meeting. How do you say that when we've been recessed for 2 weeks?
So, Madam Chair, that actually is covered in section 4.
Okay, so
And that obviously has been brought back to the commission.
it has,
In this meeting, so.
it did come back to us, and it directed that there would be changes. Those changes have been made, and we should then see them before it's approved, should we not then? If we go by this, any lease that requires a major change that does not keep with the intent of the template for a hangar and associated operations will be brought to the Airport Commission for consideration and duration. That doesn't even fit because there's no hangar. It was brought to us. There's been subsequent changes, is my understanding, to that lease. It hasn't been brought back to
So,
us.
Madam Chair, you're reading the sentence incorrectly.
Oh,
Does not keep with the intent of a template lease for a hangar. So it's a lease that does not include a hangar.
Okay,
And that has been discussed earlier in this meeting, and it's been brought back. We summarized the changes. That lease has been drafted with those changes and sent out. So are you requesting that all changes, even though directed by, have to go back to the board for approval?
I guess I'm looking for some direction from the rest of my committee members and discussion. I don't want to make this a longer process than possible, but all right, at this point, my understanding is that particular leaseholder has then subsequently come back and said they're not completely comfortable with the changes. And I'm going, so what's their recourse? What does that leaseholder do if they still are unhappy? Do they ask to be a delegation again? I don't want to see more time added to us getting a lease with this company, this person. Counselor Ald?
In regards to that discussion, we went through and everybody here agreed on what was going on as a move forward. So then we leave that to administration to move forward with those recommendations. If we need to micromanage everything that administration does, that's way outside our role. We're here for governance and making sure that everything is done properly. But we've already given the administration go ahead to do something. We can't be going back and forth and let me see what you've done. Let me see what you've done. Let me make sure that works. We agreed on the changes and said move forward.
Absolutely. We did agree on the changes that were addressed in that meeting. My fear is that we also, as I recall, indicated that we had a limited amount of time, and we asked that particular person to, I'll call it abridge or shorten what they were looking at in the lease and bringing to our attention. So now if there's additional considerations, I guess my expectation would be Mr. Lindsay, Mr. Kraus, you sit down with that individual, you go through the lease, you get it hashed out, hopefully to both of you's expectation, and we're able to sign off with some sort of meeting conversation and we move on. That's, I guess, my expectation. And I don't understand, and I don't want it coming back and forth either. I don't want to get there, but I also know if this hasn't gotten done, there's something happening here that I don't fully understand. And perhaps, Mr. Kraus, you can help me better understand.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So I'm a bit confused here because you seem to be contradicting yourself that any changes to the lease have to come back for the board's approval. But now in a sentence, you're saying that administration work with the leaseholder to modify the lease to their approval, and then we sign off.
So first part is of where the confusion would come is, I wanted to clarify, would that come back? And I'm hearing our committee saying, and I agree with them, no, we don't want it coming back. I guess where the second part of this is my expectation leaving the last meeting would be, there would have been some sort of meeting or conversations, I would assume meeting, where you go through the lease and ensure that we didn't, ensure that client, because they're a client, is happy with the lease, we're happy with the lease, and you are able then to sign off. I don't want to see that we shortened somebody's opportunity to tell us what the issues were. We only fixed what we let them have the time to do, and now there's gaps. Councillor Brown.
Madam Chair, it's my understanding, based on the 8th of July conversations and decisions that were made, that we have finished with this from our perspective, and the rest is down to operations roles and responsibilities.
Okay. And I'm comfortable with that if the individuals, any leaseholder, has some method, then do they simply ask to come back if that didn't work out for them? Councillor Hoven.
perhaps we need to add an additional step to this procedure for the ability for a leaseholder to appeal to the commission.
Seems appropriate. There's appeals to everything. How would you add that?
Well, I know if we're using the standard template, and that is the template that for the hangars and for everything, hopefully the right to appeal would not be used very often, but I think we do need to include some type of procedure so it is possible if there's an issue.
Okay,
But I'm not sure of the wording. Any leaseholder could appeal to or seek an audience, that's the wrong word.
I guess where I'm thinking is perhaps this is an opportunity to table this particular item or send it back to administration to consider some sort of addition into this procedure to add an appeal process. I think that would seem appropriate rather than us trying to hash it out here. Councillor Brown?
Yeah, again, it seems like we're overcomplicating something. As far as appeals go, in my humble opinion, that should be something that is dealt with in the airport agreement.
Unfortunately, our airport agreement is silent on appeals. And this is a procedure for the lease approval. So I think it's appropriate that we put an appeal process in here. I'd like to allow and encourage our administrative folks here from our managing partner to review this draft and perhaps add some sort of appeal wording and bring it back to the next meeting. I think that would allow us all time to consider it. I recognize we've only got about an hour left. I don't want to have to recess a second time over a period of weeks, which I'm sure the managing partner will be grateful for. I'd rather see a process that way. Councillor Hoven. And I do like the idea of creating an appeal process in this. That way, if there's an issue, it comes back to us and it's not left to the managing partner to continue to have to hash their way through this for over a year. We simply pull the pin and it comes in to us and we can help resolve that. So perhaps the best way here is before we move forward on this lease procedure, we simply ask for it to be amended and brought back. Would we prefer to just to add an appeal process into it? I think a motion will be appropriate.
I would so
Councillor
move.
Hoven.
I would move that.
Oh, gosh.
That
I
we
hope
send
we
it back to
captured-
administration to develop an appeal process to be included in the procedure.
I would guess that 98% of the time, we're never going to see that, but it does give at least a way for it to come back into us if this seems to be unresolved. And it doesn't leave it simply on the shoulders of the administration to have to muddle through it. All right, any questions? Those in favor? That is 4. Those opposed to 2. That is carried. All right. That takes us to 6.3 fuel flowage fee policy. Mr. Kraus.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So at the last airport meeting, board member Wadden requested administration bring back a procedure for fuel flowage. Administration has done that. Talked to other airports in regard to this, and it seems like the requirement to submit monthly or quarterly reports is the standard practice out there. So we identified a process and ran it through our finance department to make sure it works for them and they are happy with it. So basically going quickly through the procedure. So within all airport lease agreements.
Okay, sorry, Mr. Wadden, did you have a question?
Yeah, no, we'll let Mr. Kraus continue there. I'll just have a question at the end.
Okay, thank you for your patience, Mr. Kraus.
So with number one, it just identifies where the board would have the authority to do that under the agreement and or under the leases, where other charges can be made to leaseholders. Number two is basically states as part of the airport operation, any fuel brought in for the use by leaseholders is required to pay an established fuel flowage fee. This includes fuel that is bought by a leaseholder for individual use and the fueling station on site. Number three establishes the monitoring reporting system is a self-assessment for any fuel brought in. Number four is all leaseholders at the airport are required to report on a prescribed form the amount of fuel used on a quarterly basis as follows, and it sets out the reporting period and the due date of the form. Number five goes, all leaseholders are required to pay the fee in accordance with the town's fees and rates bylaw, which establishes as 5 cents a liter. The fee shall be established through a recommendation of the airport commission approved by both councils of county and town. 6 just clarifies GST is applicable to the fee. 7 establishes a fuel flow form shall be submitted even if no fuel was dispensed or purchased, and that just keeps everything in check and balance, that knowing everyone is reporting. Number 8, all fuel flow forms shall be submitted with copies of invoices or bills of lading showing the liters or fuel purchased or dispensed. Then number 9 is failure to submit a fuel flow form shall be considered as a breach of the lease, and the provisions of the lease would take over from there. And then the draft form has been attached.
Mr. Wadden?
Yeah, just curious as to which airports were contacted and queried about fuel flow.
I believe we have that in the report. I believe it was Camrose. I would have to go back, Mr. Wadden, and identify that, but there was 3. I think Camrose Lacombe come to mind, but I would have to go back and verify that.
Okay, not a problem there. And then how is the how are they going to deal with enforcement to ensure that these are submitted and that everyone is all on the same playing field there?
Yeah, so that is number 9 in the draft procedure. Failure to submit or falsify a fuel flow form shall be considered a breach of the leaseholder's agreement and subject to the provisions of the lease. So we could write a letter of default to the leaseholder, and they would have to rectify that within 30 days, that default, and at the worst case scenario, the lease can be canceled.
Okay, so there's no way to I mean, it's pretty easy to see when the big B trains pull into our hangar forestry or out on the ramp, but how are we going to deal with smaller quantities like slip tanks or jerry cans or whatever? This is all going to be on the honor system as per item 9.
Yeah, so it is basically on the honor system or self-assessment. But I believe as our airport supervisor has some time out there, gets to know everyone, I think he would be able to identify tenants bringing in their own fuel and question it. So.
Okay, poor Jim there. We don't want to have him working 24 hours a day, but okay. Yeah, just wanted to clarify that. Thanks.
So you get to be the bad guy. Okay. All right, the only thing I noted is on point number 2, as part of the airport operation, any fuel, should it just any fuel or should it say aviation fuel? Or am I splitting hairs? Like, I don't know enough about this, but is there clarification required there? I just thought add, like, as part of the airport operation, I would add the word aviation fuel brought on.
Madam Chair, I'll have Mr. Lindsay respond to that because I'm not fully versed in the types of fuel that all types of aircraft use. So,
Okay, typically it's jet fuel, Jet A1 or 100 loaded avgas. There's 2 fuels we are concerned about here. So it's aviation fuels, both kinds.
So perhaps Mr. Wadden.
Yeah, there are some aircraft that are approved to run on MoGas as well, so that should be added in there. So it should be, we're not talking about fuels here for lawnmowers or side by sides or stuff like that, but it should specify fuels for aviation use.
Okay. So is that appropriate then to add the word aviation fuel? That's kind.
so Madam Chair, on the form, it does have a spot for type of fuel used.
Okay. So are we good with this form? Okay.
And Madam Chair, for further clarification, under the definitions, it means the amount of aviation fuel that is dispensed or purchased under fuel flow definition. So it's
Okay.
specific to aviation.
So it's captured in this, so that's good. Thank you for that clarity. I just want to make sure we try to get this as correct as possible. If we're comfortable with that, then we'll be looking for a motion unless there's any changes that we need to amend on this. Councillor Hoven.
I would move that acceptance of this.
Okay. Of this, no changes required. Those in favor? That is carried unanimously. All right, that then brings us to 7.1, I believe. I hope I haven't missed anything. Vehicle access procedure. Vehicle access procedure attachments are all there. Mr. Kraus?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So the board asked us to bring this back for the board's review and consideration. I'll probably have Mr. Lindsay speak on the requirements of having some type of approval to have vehicles airside. But one thing we will comment on is probably under the form, under section 5. We have commercial general liability and automotive liability that can probably be revised just to commercial general liability to 2 million. Do you have any comments, Mr. Lindsay?
Well, as far as the legalities of it's covered up in the CARS 301.03, where the aerodrome operator basically controls who goes airside in some form as a summary. As far as the insurance, it's saying you have to have the commercial and automotive insurance. And my thought is that should be and or. Because not everyone has commercial insurance.
Exactly.
So that's just my thought on that one.
And so where would we see that change? On what page? Mr. Kraus?
159,
159.
section 5.
So it would be where, how would we change that then? To say and or, where does that go?
Between section 5A and B.
So we just write and or in there. Okay. It's quiet while we go through this clearly. So with regard to the proposed policy, that starts on page 156, if I'm correct, and then goes to page 160, no, 159. Okay, thank you. Sorry, I'm just making sure I understand. So it says here on page 156, no person shall walk, stand, drive a vehicle, park a vehicle or aircraft, or cause an obstruction on the movement area of the aerodrome except in accordance with the permission given by the operator of the aerodrome. That would be you, Mr. Lindsay. I assume on our behalf. On our behalf, absolutely. Okay. Where applicable by the, and it says where applicable, air traffic control, so we don't have that. Is, again, that's a phone call to you?
And this one.
And, oh, they have to fill out the form. Do they fill this form out every time?
No, it's once you get permission to airside, you get permission. Once you get permission to go airside, you get permission to go airside, unless you start infracting the rules as set on cars.
Okay, oh, Mr. Counselor Hoven, I noticed that you had your, and then I'll go to council.
I was just going to ask for clarification. Like, is this a one-time use, but this is, you get it filled out once and then you're allowed to do it, but do people have to notify you every time, even though they have this?
Once you have this airside access permission, you're good to go.
Okay.
On the apron and the taxiways and not beyond the hold lines to the runway.
Understood. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Wadden.
Okay, so I think we have to be very clear on the cars here. So the cars state permission. So nowhere in the cars does it state that it has to be written permission. Verbal permission can be given, and certainly doesn't have to be written down and documented or anything. So I motion that all leaseholders that have hangars and businesses at the airport have verbal permission from this commission to access their businesses and hangars as per the maps, which allows them access through the taxiways and the aprons to their locations, and that in the new leases that are written up, written permission will be given in the leases. We know that all commercial operations have $2 million of liability, and we know that all private insurance has $1 million of liability. So we're just getting into a bunch of red tape here, and this is not represent the size and scope of this airport here. So.
Okay, so Mr. Wadden, just to be clear, we kind of had what I believe to be is your motion, and then you kind of went straight into your purpose for your motion. So for
yes, so let's redo that again. So I motion through the committee that all leaseholders, business and hangar owners have verbal permission to access their businesses and property.
okay, we have a point of order on the floor, Mr. Brown. Councillor
Yeah,
Brown.
through the chair, I'd ask Mr. Wadden to kind of focus his conversation towards the mic. I missed a good part of that because it's garbled.
Okay,
Okay, can you hear me now?
yes, thank you.
All right, so I motion that all leaseholders and businesses have verbal permission to access their hangars and businesses from this airport, permission given from this airport commission.
Councillor Brown.
In my humble opinion, again, Madam Chair, I believe this is an operations matter, not a matter for this committee.
Thank you for that. I look at this and I'm torn because I recognize we already have cars that does this in 301.3 and 301.8. And I wonder if our policy is an overreach on cars. And I suspect that is, like, do we need a policy for something that is already here based on cars? Maybe we do, maybe we don't. Mr. Wadd. And remember, try to focus on the speaker.
Yeah, so we don't have a problem with individuals that own hangars and own businesses here. We don't have a approval problem or an insurance problem. What we have is a security problem at the airport. This is the impression that I get. So there are people that can come there at night, or people that don't own hangars or don't own businesses or don't have aircraft and have access airside. And that is in violation of the cars. And because the airport is not staffed 24 hours with multiple people and doesn't have security, so we have to ask ourselves, what problem are we really looking at here? Or what problem are we trying to solve?
Thank you for that. That was what was going through my mind here as you were saying it. I wonder, has there been past issues with access and or security? Mr. Kraus.
Madam Chair, I think what administration is asking is giving our airport supervisor the ability to do his job and to have a little bit of control of what's going on the airport. I mean, it says right in there, the driver of vehicle operates on a maneuvering area only as authorized by the aerodrome operator. At least give him the ability to control any traffic that's airside. I don't think this is red tape. I mean, it's assigning a 2-page form that you understand of the rules of going airside. You sign it and you're good to go for forever while you're there. So, I mean, this is just a procedure. I mean, I don't think it's appropriate for this board to say, hey, anyone can go out there because we just give you verbal permission through this board, and it provides Mr. Lindsay with no control of operating a safe airport.
That's not what I said at all, Dean. I said all the leaseholders and the business owners. We're not allowing all sorts of people to go out airside. That's a security problem. That's not a leaseholder access problem.
Councillor Ald.
So Kyle, just a quick question. So if everybody is following the rules and doing what they're supposed to be doing, then there should be no reason why for them not to sign this slip and saying they understand our rules and it's at our airport and they understand what they're supposed to be doing, sign it, and they're good to go.
If I may, I think we're missing a golden opportunity. Folks, we're about to strike a task force of airport folks who use the airport. Why don't we put items 7.1 and 7.2 to them? Let's take that task force for a spin and see what they can do with this. After all, those are the folks who use this airport all the time. That allows Mr. Lindsay and our managing partner an opportunity to be part of the discussion. The stakeholders are represented by all, and we simply table the vehicle access procedure and the stakeholder representative selection process until that task force comes back with a recommendation. Why don't we do that?
Madam Chair, I'm just going to comment that this is a standard operating procedure. It's no different than SOP for a fire department or anything. This is just a simple procedure to allow airside and ensure that we're covered under the regulations.
I guess
This is not a task force issue that needs to be debated of who can drive on an airside. I mean, there is regulations there that they need authorization from the airport operator. We put in a simple procedure where you just have to read the rules, sign off, and you're good to go. So this is just a simple SOP.
It doesn't encompass this process here that you're going through doesn't encompass all users of the airport. Okay, so it doesn't incorporate or doesn't include transient aircraft. It doesn't include forestry helicopters, which just happened to be all over the airport here in the last couple of weeks because of the fire season. So there has to be some discretion that individuals or helicopters or airplanes can come up to Mr. Lindsay and say, "Hey, man, we're here for the next couple of weeks on fires. We're parking on the grass here. We need to get access to our helicopter here for maintenance and all the rest of that stuff." And just like in the past, the airport manager says, "Yeah, not a problem. We want you to go through this gate here, stay off of here, and all good." And operations continue 24 hours a day. So if we're going to have one person start filling out forms and signing stuff, then everybody has to do it. And you're building yourself nothing but a red tape nightmare.
All right, Counselor Ald, go to you. And then I think we need to just
Wrap this up.
go back and have that read back to us so we understand the motion on the table and go from there. Is that Counselor Ald?
Yes.
So that's what you were asking for. Okay. I was reading your mind today. That's great. So could we read back that motion so we understand it?
Okay, so the motion that I have is be it resolved that the airport committee grant verbal permission to all leaseholders and businesses to access their businesses and hangars. Pardon me?
So that's leaseholders and who?
Leaseholders and businesses to access their businesses and hangars. Is that correct?
Mr. Wadden, did we capture what you were asking for?
Yeah, that sounds good to me. That's the nuts and bolts of it for sure.
All right. Are there any other questions? If not, those in favor? Those opposed? It is 3-3. It is defeated. All right. So that leaves us with perhaps my recommendation that we forward these two procedures back to this task force and ask them to help us create the best procedure possible, given they are the stakeholders. I've often found that when you involve the people who have to use these procedures, they're less likely to battle them when you implement them, if they help build them. That is my impetus for making this recommendation. So to that end, perhaps we can look at 7.1 and 7.2 and consider them to go to the task force for review and recommendation, and I will make that motion. I'm trying to expedite this process as well and find a way forward that allows all stakeholders to feel like they had input.
So Madam Chair, just for legislative procedure, you're combining 7.1 and 7.2 into one motion where 7.2 has not.
Being brought,
Up.
okay. All right, let's do them one at a time then. I'll just leave that as my motion of being that we would forward the vehicle access procedure, the draft vehicle access procedure to the task force for review and recommendation back to our committee. Any questions or comments on that way forward? Councillor Ault.
I just have a comment. Your comment about expedite this process is totally counterproductive to what's going on here. We asked administration last time to come back with these procedures for us. They've done that. They've given us good procedures. Now we're asking it to go to a committee that doesn't even exist. It is totally counterproductive to do this. That's my comment.
And I appreciate that. And I can understand where you could see that as being not intuitive as to being expedited. But I truly believe that if we put it through to this task force, once established, we will get a better product. There will be less confusion. They will be part of the solution. So I would see that as a more expedited process when we look at not having subsequent discussions with various stakeholders after the fact and us taking this back and refixing it time and again. I think you get a buy-in process if you put it through to those folks. That's my thinking. Councillor Brown.
I just want to reiterate, this is an operations matter.
All right. Councillor Hoven.
I don't know if it needs to go to a task force, but the change I would like to see is some type of statement that business owners have a right to access their building by a vehicle, and a process for if this is abused, how, if this process is abused of the business owners, the following steps that they need to take to be reinstated to have access to their facility. Airport safety should be a big concern of ours. We cannot have cars driving up and down the taxiway or the apron causing issues, and the airport manager needs to have some authority to ensure that people are following the rules and regulations and keeping the airport safe. I don't think it needs to go to the task force. I think administration should look at it again and make sure business owners have a right to their lease, and then the steps that are necessary if someone in the past has abused it, what they need to do to be reinstated to have access.
Okay, given that there is not appetite for sending it to the task force, I will rescind my motion. So what motion would we like to make to keep this process moving forward? Councillor Hoven indicated he wants some changes added to this. Do we want to send it back to administration to make some amendments to this, to give that some consideration with regard to what Mr. Wadden suggested about access for hangar and business owners? Is that the kind of direction we want to give Mr. Wadden? And then I'm going to Councillor Alt.
Yeah, I just have a question. How does a piece of paper stop someone that doesn't know about the piece of paper? So like I said, we don't have an authorization problem. We have a security problem here. So when the airport wants to deal with a security problem, then this will make more sense. And what is to prevent, for example, in the past, where those that do have businesses have been denied access?
Perhaps that's a question for Mr. Lindsay and Mr. Kraus. Has there been instances in the past? Like, I guess I'm still stuck on, is there a problem? And I get that we need to figure out a process for permission. I just thought they phoned up Mr. Lindsay and off they went. Mr. Kraus and Mr. Lindsay, I look to your guidance.
Typically, the CARS regulations are very clear on this, and most airports can develop a policy to allow airside access. Most airports I've worked at have a full AVOP program, which is a manual of rules, regulations, what the color lights mean, everything else. And you write a test and do a practical test afterwards. This is a much abbreviated version, much simplified version of that. It just simply lets the airport commission and the owners know the person's driving airside, know the rules, know what they're doing, and are a lot lower liability to anybody else on the airport. So it's nothing against the people who want to access business. Most people have access to the business ground side anyways. There's very few require access full-time airside. And once they're in their aircraft, they're covered by the CARS regulations of aircraft. They're taxiing as a pilot, and they're allowed airside anyways. So it's just to have some control over who goes inside the gates and does their business. And this is not a very onerous process. It's a very simplified process from every other airport I've worked at in the past.
Other thoughts or comments? Councillor Alt?
I just want to be able to let Jim have control of the airport, make sure that he knows what's going on. And if this simple process gives him some security in that, then I'd like to make a motion.
All right, what motion would you like to make?
The recommended alternative, be it resolved that the commission accepts the current vehicle access to the apron and taxi Bravo process as presented.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna promote you here. Or I'm not sure. Mr. Kraus.
Just in regards to Councillor Ald's motion, administration is making a recommendation on the insurance to add the word or.
Okay. Right, and or.
Is it and or? Like they would need both then?
Or.
So it's just the word or. Okay, between A and B on the permission slip. Okay. I think we understand that now. And I appreciate the diligence we are trying to take in this. So we have a motion on the table. Mr. Wadden, did you hear the motion?
I did, yes.
Okay. I have one question before well, no, I'll ask it after. Just to keep this clear. Those in favor? 3, 4. Those opposed? To 2. It is going forward. Sorry, I'm losing that right word. It's approved, carried. Thank you. I do have one question. So now that this is being approved, there is a gent out there on the in the airport. I've heard running what would appear to be a jet on wheels without wings. How does that get approved? Does that happen here? Okay. So perhaps whoever knows about that can speak to you, Mr. Lindsay, about this. I think it's a jet of some kind, but I have had a complaint about that. So I suspect it needs to go to you. So I direct anybody who's seen that and is concerned to talk to Mr. Lindsay. Okay, so that takes us to 7.2. The stakeholder representative selection process. Mr. Kraus, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So as Mr. Wadden's term is coming to his 2-year appointment, and administration was reviewing the selection process for the stakeholder representative. In reviewing the minutes back in 2013, that procedure was supposed to be established and brought to the commission for approval. We couldn't find no record in the minutes or anything of the commission approving that process. So administration drafted a process for the board to consider or amend or adopt for that selection. So we kept it pretty broad, and it basically just leaves it all up to the stakeholders at the airport to come together and for them to make their one selection to present to the board.
Okay, would that not then be the task force? Is this an appropriate job for the task force?
Sorry, can you clarify that? What job would be appropriate for the task force?
To look at this process and see if it is representative of a process and a procedure that would work for finding and selecting their representative. Would that not be the perfect thing to put to the task force and ask them to help us create this procedure? Bring us, like, review it and bring us your recommended procedure. This is a good draft. It's an excellent draft. Let's put it to the task force and let them look at it and see that works for us or it doesn't. They're the ones we're asking for somebody to bring it back.
The idea of that task force was simply to develop an aerobatics policy, not to go through every policy that we want to have administration start. You said this is an excellent draft, then we sitting around this table are the right people to approve this. And we could do it today and be done with it.
I said, to be clear, it's an excellent start. So, all right, let's go through it. Mr. Kraus, perhaps you can walk us through this procedure.
Sure, Madam Chair. So it's page 166 is the starting of the procedure. So number one, it just states for the purpose of the procedure, stakeholder means the person or corporation who has a valid lease at the airport, a representative of the Rocky Flying Club, and a representative of the Rocky Air Show Society. And then number two, as per the airport agreement, there will be a member on the Airport Commission Board representing the stakeholders as a whole. Number three, the member shall be appointed for a 2-year term by the board in accordance to the airport agreement. Number four, the member shall be selected by the stakeholders collectively. The stakeholders shall determine their own process in selecting the member to recommend to the board. The stakeholders shall also select an alternate member in this process. Number five, the stakeholder shall advise the board in writing of the selected member and the alternate member no later than October 1st of the year the previous member term expires. The new member shall be appointed at the first Airport Commission meeting after the town and county's legislative organizational meeting. Number six, the stakeholders may replace their member or alternate member at their pleasure using the process they have established to select a member. So that's actually right in the airport agreement also. Number seven, the board may not accept the recommended member from the stakeholders if it reasonably deems the selection is not in the best interest of the Airport Commission. In such a case, the board will advise the stakeholders of the reason and request another proposed member be recommended.
Councillor Hoven.
So Mr. Kraus, number four, the members shall be selected by the stakeholders collectively. The stakeholders shall determine their own process in selecting the member. My concern is that that is just way too broad, and it'd be, you know, you'd have the Flying Club, the Aerobatics Club, the Hangers Group, all these different groups coming together to try to hammer out the process for selecting a member. And I don't know if we would ever get past that step. I would rather see administration come up with the process for the stakeholders to determine. But, you know, maybe it's a public meeting in September before the org meeting where all these different groups get one vote or different pilots get one vote. I think this is just too broad, and it's never going to get past the selection.
Yeah, so Madam Chair, actually, in probably our initial draft, we had a process in there, and then we stepped back saying, for example, we had shall be organized by the Rocky Flying Club, right? And then, well, no, we feel there could be opposition to that. So we took a step back and said, there's the leaseholders, the Air Show Society, the Rocky Flying Club, that are present on the site. Hopefully they could get together to form a process, but it's up to the board of how the process is.
Mr. Wadden.
Yeah, so point number one, from what I understand, the Rocky Flying Club is shut down or is on hiatus, and there's no mention of the Alberta Aerobatics Association in there.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Wadden, for that comment. And I can explain, because when we were drafting this, we're going, who actually has a physical presence, an association with a physical presence at the airport. Not saying the aerobatics don't have pilots and planes at the airport, but it's the Alberta Aerobatics Society. I mean, but that's entirely up to the board of who they want as stakeholders. But the reason why it wasn't put in the draft is because they didn't have the actual association didn't have a physical presence at the airport.
Yeah, well, they do with respect to hangar ownership. So I feel that they should be added in item number one there.
If they have a lease at the airport, they already get, I'm going to say, a vote in choosing that, correct?
That's correct.
And so this is so you don't have, well, I guess you have people with skin in the game, right? Because the people who own hangars want long-term sustainability, and they'll pick the best member to represent that.
Could we call it the Rocky Airport General Aviation Community and not list all of these? That way it's all encompassing.
Yeah, because it's a bit contradictory here for number one, because so we're saying that the Alberta Aerobatics Association doesn't have a presence at the airport. Well, they do, and the Rocky Flying Club doesn't have a presence at the airport. They don't have an office, or they don't have. I mean, at least the Aerobatics Club has a trophy case in the terminal building. There's and it's the same with the Air Show Society. So if you're gonna include a flying club that doesn't exist and or is on hiatus, and if you're going to include the Rocky Air Show Society, then most certainly one of the biggest users of the airport, the Alberta Aerobatics Association, should be included in that. Or then you take everybody out of there other than the Rocky Air Show Society, because they are a society, and everybody else from flying clubs or the Aerobatics Association falls under the hangar ownership stakeholder leases.
Wow, that was a lot. Councillor Ald?
Just for clarification, are they not included in there when it says actual leaseholder, which the Aerobatics Clubs has leaseholders, and the two aviation groups? So that would include the aerobatics, would it not?
Well, then why is the Flying Club mentioned by name, and then why is the Air Show Society mentioned by name and not the Alberta Aerobatics Association? So if you're mentioning clubs, then you got to mention all the clubs. If you're mentioning just hangar owners and businesses, then everybody else's name should be out there. This is, just looks discriminatory to me.
Well, and I'm more concerned about forgetting someone. Because it's just like thank yous. When you're thanking everybody and you start naming people, you're bound to forget somebody. So I'm thinking once you get to, for the purposes of the procedure, a stakeholder means the person or corporation who has a valid lease at the airport, and representatives of CYRM general aviation community should be all encompassing that. Councillor Hoven?
I think we're getting into a gray area by just allowing any community member there without giving them a really defined process to move the process forward, because you've got how many hangar owners? Is it? There's 20. Okay, so I'm just gonna use that number. If you could have 25 hangar owners who've got hundreds of thousands of dollars of investment there, and unless you define who's going to be choosing that person, you could have 100 pilots show up and claim to be a representative. And who knows if they are or not, which goes to my point. We need to give them a good process to, take away any chance of conflict as they're picking the stakeholder or choosing the stakeholder representative. I guess one option, and it's limiting who gets to have a vote, but just let it go with the person or corporation who has a valid lease at the airport, and there'd be 25 votes. And members of the aerobatics community who have a lease would have a vote. Members of the Rocky Flying Club who have a lease would have a vote. And because we do need to make a decision, because we do need to have a person picked for October.
Well, here's the other option. If you feel you need more information, we can table this and get more information from administration, but we also then need to give them direction of what we're asking for that additional information. If we do that and we're concerned about, because this is coming up and we need to decide, we can decide to leave Mr. Wadden in place, if of course he is amiable, for an additional 6 months while we sort this out. I'm just asking if that's appropriate, Mr. Kraus.
Madam Chair, so actually, I think what Councillor Hoven has suggested is probably the best way forward. I mean, if it's strictly leaseholders, they're the ones who've invested into the airport, like financially. So it'd be 25 votes, and the procedure could be simply us sending a letter out to them, asking them to collectively meet and come forward with a recommendation.
Or two.
Or two, because then we didn't need an
Right.
alternate also, yes.
Yeah.
Councillor Brown?
I think Councillor Hoven's suggestion is a viable move forward.
And I guess if that is not, if the stakeholders do not like that process, they can do it this year, and then that representative can recommend how to change it for future years.
Works for me.
All right, so we have a motion. I'm going to do it to you every time this time because we've got Mr. Wadden quite a ways away. He's listening on the phone for the motion.
No problem. So I've got, be it resolved that the commission adopt the stakeholder representative selection procedure 002/2021 with the following amendments. That section 4 be revised to allow for administration to determine a process for selecting a member for recommendation to the board, and that section 1 be amended to state that a stakeholder includes any person or leaseholder at the Rocky Mountain House Airport.
Any person or corporation who has a valid lease.
Okay, I'll make that amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Wadden?
Yes, just a side note here. What about those that have multiple leases? Then they'll have multiple votes, correct?
Oh boy, everything got gray suddenly here. So could you give us an example maybe so we better understand what you mean by that?
Well, do we not have leaseholders out there that hold multiple leases with multiple hangars?
So I'm hearing, yes, we do. So that means everybody gets one vote regardless of if you have 3 hangars, you get 1 vote. And if you have 1 hangar, you get 1 vote. That seems odd there.
Yeah, no,
bit to me.
that doesn't work for somebody who has the most skin in the game or has the most expensive assembly of hangars out there. So if it's stakeholders and individual leases, then it should be each multiple votes for those each lease.
I would suggest the most skin in the game is the gentleman to my right here is probably got the biggest, but he doesn't have more than 1 lease. You've got 1 lease. Councillor Hoven.
I'm just thinking right now.
I'm just
Mr.
having-
Moore, there we
I'm
go.
just having a hard time trying to understand why people would need more than 1 vote. That group of people is going to get together and they're going to decide in that group who's going to represent them. Why would 1 person need to come to that group with 3 votes? I don't really understand the logic there.
Well, we're saying stakeholders or leaseholders. We have an individual out there that has 4 hangars and has 4 leases.
Are there subleases? You know, like if maybe you've got 4, but maybe you've got a sublease in there that now you've got somebody who has a plane and they're maybe subletting from a lease. I don't know. And I'm not trying to complicate this, but maybe there's subleases in there. I don't understand. Councillor Hoven.
And another complication is what if there's a corporation that owns 3 leases, and for example, let's say it's me and my wife, we both own the corporation. Do I get 2 votes then because I'm representing this 1 lease, and I'll assign my wife to represent the the same corporation for a different lease? Right, so is it just, we just need to clarify this so there's no confusion in October.
Mr. Moore.
Well, again, I think, and that's, I mean, Dean kind of spoke to a little bit about letting the group decide on the process and how they're going to elect their representative. That to me is, that's where it really is. I mean, if you've got more skin in the game, then you have to pull up and get everybody, convince everybody that you should be the representative, I guess. But I don't think we should decide that here. That's up to them to decide who they want to send to this group.
Okay. Any other questions or thoughts? Oh, boy. Councillor Hoven.
If we are going to go that route and let the stakeholders decide, I think we need to have another motion that if the stakeholders cannot come to a decision, this board can appoint a member.
So
Because you don't want to stalemate for 8 months that if that group cannot pick a member, we need to have a representative, and this committee just needs to pick someone.
So, Madam Chair, just for administration's clarification of where we're at with the procedure. So in item 1, we are striking out everything that starts with a representative of the Rocky Flying Club and a representative of the Rocky Air Show. So that gets struck out. So it is just a stakeholder means a person or corporation who has a valid lease at the airport.
Okay.
Is that correct? We're leaving number 4 as is, leaving it up to the stakeholders to determine their process. And then we'll be adding a section 8 that clarifies if the stakeholders cannot come up with a single representative, the board will be appointing. Or the board can appoint.
Councillor Hoven.
I think it would be best if the members can pick someone. But if there is an issue, this commission then has the authority to make sure we have adequate representation.
And just for clarity, it's my understanding, Mr. Kraus and his team need to know, are we having point for them determine their own process, or are we having administration determine a process and bring it back to us? I've said both, so
Well,
Councillor
the
Brown, if you could push the button, there you go.
yeah, we've had a conversation that involved many aspects of of amending the proposed document. I think it's probably best that administration take it back, because there's things that we did discuss that actually haven't been addressed in the document itself. So administration, having heard the discussions, if they can take it back and make amendments and bring it back to us, that would be the most logical route.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor, I think. I'm just clarifying, do we have I believe we have a motion on the floor.
Councillor Brown's motion.
Yes.
Be it resolved that the airport committee instruct administration to make the changes as directed by the airport committee to the stakeholder representative selection procedure 002/2001 and bring the report back to a future airport committee meeting.
Yes, and that way we'd have opportunity to see the revised and amended process, and then have any further discussion and then create a recommendation. I think that seems appropriate. Any other questions? Those in favor? That is carried unanimously. Perfect. All right, 7.2, we've got like 10 whole minutes to try to, or 7.3, 10 whole minutes. Airport operating and capital financial statements. And we had a new one just put in front of us this morning, an updated one. Mr. Kraus, perhaps you can walk us through this.
Yep, thank you, Madam Chair. So just basically for the commission's information is just where we're standing at with finances in there. I can just quickly run through it if you wish. So sales and fees, we're at 78%. So on target there. Rentals and leases, we're at 43% of the budget item, and that's will obviously be 100% by year end. It just depends when each individual lease or is due. Salary and on the expenditure side, salaries, we're at 29%. Obviously, that's way below budget just because we had vacancies. Insurance, we're at 54%. So it's on target. Materials and supplies, we're at 57%, but this is to the end of July, so we're sitting good there. Repairs and maintenance, we're at 39%. That will definitely hit 100% by year end. Mr. Lindsay can expand on that in his report. Utilities, 46%, so we're on par there for the budget. A little bit below, actually, so that's good news. Contracted and general services, we're at 58%, so that's appropriate for the end of July. Professional fees, we 125%, so we're already over in professional fees. And just for clarification, that is legal fees. And that will obviously go up more because we're now reviewing the insurance policy and aerobatics. Advertising and promotion, 71%. We'll keep that in check for the year end. It's not a big budget anyway, only $1,000. Membership, training and mileage, no expenditures in that section yet this year. So overall, on target, if not below, for expenditures.
All right, any questions or comments with regard to the financial statement here? If Councillor Hoven.
Mr. Kraus, the transfer to reserves, what is that reserve and what is the current balance of that reserve?
Madam Chair, I would have to check with our finance for the actual balance on that. But those are funds that we basically just put into an operating reserve for the airport. Both the county and the town do that.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
I could end for operations into reserve. I could see that for the one side, but not the other, because isn't operations just operations?
So Madam Chair, just a little clarification on my wording. It's probably, I would have to look at our reserve policy to determine, but it would be for capital. I'm sure the counties is the same.
It's quite possible. Thank you for that clarification. All right. We'll look forward to more information on that as it becomes available. So we're looking for the recommended action is that the committee accept the July 31st, 2021 operating and capital statement for information. Councillor Brown.
I'll make that motion, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Wadden, were you able to hear that motion? Perfect. We don't have to even have you read it back. Well done. Those in favor? That is carried unanimously. Perfect. So that brings us to 7.4, and likely you don't have that on yours. It was added, or you do. Perfect. Noise complaints. I know that we brought that forth a little bit, just with regard to many complaints we had received within a 1-week period. When we reached out to some folks, it's my understanding, Mr. Lindsay, they should simply be calling Transport Canada. So I think that we could simply just put that on our websites if there's a concern, a complaint, and maybe put their number there. Now, do we need a motion to that effect or to advertise it thusly? Perhaps that's the best. And that way it's clear. I can make that motion.
Madam Chair, just for clarification, so noise complaints go to Transport Canada?
That it is their airspace, my understanding. That's my understanding. So I'll make that motion. And that way we can advertise it thusly, both on the town and county websites.
Just Madam Chair, just for clarification, because my understanding was that Transport Canada would not take noise complaints and they refer it back to the airport or the owners of the airport.
Well, these are the ones that's happening out in the countryside, and there's complaints coming in about noise that they can hear a plane overhead or something. So that's not on us as airport operator. They're out there doing things in the countryside. Maybe they're measuring pipelines for all I know. So I think that simply putting Transport Canada's number on our website should be a simple matter of, and I say that simple and I apologize, Laura, it's probably nothing simple about it, but you make it look simple. So thank you for that. Councillor Brown.
I have no objection with it being going on the website, but I would like to hear what is the norm at other airports and how they handle noise complaints, because we as counselors get noise complaints directed to us when there's activities over the airport.
So are you asking for additional information?
I would just like to hear Mr. Lindsay's thoughts on what is the norm for airports.
Mr. Lindsay?
Okay, typically, Traffic Canada deals with the cars regulations. There's nothing in the cars about noise I'm aware of, other than over built up areas and noise sensitive livestock. The county has a noise bylaw, which is typically how it's been dealt with in the past, other airports I've worked at. It's a noise issue in the county off the airport. So, I mean, there's no cars regulations against noise. That's what Transport Canada deals with, is the cars regulations, in my experience.
I'm going to ask Mr. Reed if you could perhaps speak to our county bylaw, because I don't believe that we are in charge of the airspace. My understanding it is Transport Canada, and that's why I'm trying to direct it there. If somebody sees something happening and has noise, don't they simply call those folks and they investigate it? Mr. Reed, if you would, please.
Certainly at the. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the council. I can only say that our bylaw doesn't contemplate airspace, air noise violations. We would, of course, and I think it would actually fall to the managing partner, but this committee perhaps would have to explore that further. If there was noise complaints based on the ground at the airport. So for example, a testing of an engine, which happened to me the other day. I heard a very loud noise and I went over to find out what it was, and it was simply an airplane starting up. So those noise complaints, ground-based noise complaints could be applicable to that bylaw, but anything in the air would not be our purview and would be, I would say, almost impossible for the airport to be responsible for the planes that fly anywhere in the county. So I think there is a bit of a disconnect between airport-based noise and airplane-based noise. So your example of a pilot flying a pipeline, how does that in any way relate to the airport? Is my question to this board.
Well, and I guess that's why my motion is for those noise complaints, put them through to Transport Canada.
And if I may add supplemental, the Transport Canada does indicate that airport noise should be addressed by the airport manager. So they do have that clarity in their guidelines, but the rest of this, the airspace management, I don't know how a municipality could ever have jurisdiction over that.
Well, thank you for that clarity. And that is precisely what I'm getting at. If there's complaints coming because something happened 5 miles away, I have no expectation that Mr. Lindsay would be dealing with that. I would anticipate you would be directing them to Transport Canada.
So, Madam Chair, just for a little clarification to get the issue, brought up. I mean, I know the noise, the complaints that came to the town that we forwarded off to the county was aerobatics for constantly practicing in it for a period of time. And that's something that we approve. So I think that's what these noise complaints are. And I don't know if Mr. Reed wants to expand on that, if I'm accurate on the actual basis of the complaints or not.
I'll go to Mr. Reed and then I'm going to go to Mr. Wadden, who's desperately waving.
So the complaints that we have received, we were unable to verify that they were actually aerobatics complaints. So again, the difficulty with trying to regulate airspace anyway from the ground and from the pocket of land that we sort of are responsible for. So I couldn't give any further information on whether or not aerobatics is the problem of the complaint. We'd have to get a bunch more sort of data on how we would ever enforce that anyway.
And Madam Chair, I think the only reason I bring it to the board's attention, because if it is aerobatics, it might be something the task force wants to address in their policy. Like maybe aerobatics occur during certain times during the day, so the nearby residents have a quiet evening or something like that. And that's the only reason why I bring it forward to the board's attention.
Okay, and that makes sense to me as well. And that's something that that task force would be well situated for. Mr. Wadden.
Yeah, there's already hourly restrictions on the aerobatics practice and competitions and performances and all that there. So that's all part of it already. So how many complaints have we had, and from whom?
I will refer that back to Mr. Kraus.
Madam Chair, I need to refer that to Mr. Reed, because when the town receives it, we just fire it over to him.
And I would have to do a few minutes of going back to all those emails to check. There would be some protection of privacy issues that we'd also have to address. So if you want to give me a few minutes, or
No, you can get back to us on that. That's not a problem. But like you said, if we have 3 noise complaints or 300 noise complaints, is a big difference. And if we have people complaining at the airport about airport noise, or we have people outside of 5 miles or outside of the circuit complaining about airport noise, and if they don't have aircraft registrations, then it's a non-event. If you live by an airport, well, guess what? There's going to be airport noise there. We just had 50 some aircraft flying for the air tour here not that long ago, did we not? I guarantee you, when 50 aircraft or 40 aircraft come in and land, there is going to be a lot of noise, and it will draw attention. So that's all part of owning and running an airport.
All right, Mr. Reed.
I can add that we did a land title search, and none of the complaints we've received so far were from adjacent landowners. And I believe only one of them was within, I want to say 3 miles, but I would have to double check that, but it's not any of the adjacent landowners. And we on our side did not receive any complaints from the air tour day, which was certainly one of the loudest days that I've experienced since I've moved here.
All right, so what I really was just trying to get is ensuring that we have the intent of my motion is that we simply advertise Transport Canada's number on our websites for noise complaints out, beyond the preview of what's happening at the airport, which is, in my understanding, the number is 1-866-995-9737. And I think it's simply just giving folks another number, another option to call, rather than Mr. Lindsay's and the towns. So perhaps just for clarity, if you could read back my motion.
Be it resolved that the airport committee instruct administration to advertise that any noise complaints be sent to Transport Canada, providing residents with the number to Transport Canada.
Yeah, you don't need to worry about the number. All right, is there any other questions with regard to that? Those in favor? That is 4. Those opposed? To 2. That is carried. All right, that takes us to 7.5, event process policy. Councillor Hoven, you brought that forward. I know that we're trying to get out because you've got other things.
I can spare a few more minutes.
Okay. It's.
My mind is drawing a blank after the last.
Okay, so basically, I think you had indicated that we need a process for event process when it seemed like there was a lot of moving parts with that last tour that came through. And I think that when you brought it forward, you were interested in creating a policy on process to sort of streamline and focus people on where they can go through the steps to get events at our airport.
You've read my mind.
Okay, perfect. So would you like to make some sort of motion?
I will make that motion.
And then bring it back.
I will make that motion.
Okay. Oh, gosh, just trying to recall what we were up to at that time. All right. I hate to do this to you, but if you could read back the general gist of that motion.
be it resolved that the airport committee instruct administration to provide a report on event process policy and bring it back to the next committee, airport committee meeting.
That sounds good. But it's your motion, Councillor Hogan. Councillor Brown.
I'm just curious if administration feels the next meeting, even though that date is unknown, how much time do they really need?
Oh, good point. What kind of timeline do you think you would need, Mr. Lindsay and Mr. Kraus?
So Madam Chair, I'm basically looking for a little clarification on what the board wants to see in this policy. Because, is it coming back to the committee for approval for events? Is that where?
Well, this originated because we had the air fly-in, the air tour coming, and it went to the council, Clearwater Council. Then it went to the town of Rocky Mountain House. And we're just looking for a clear, consistent policy. So if someone wants to do an air event, what is the process for them doing it? Maybe it's only here to this commission to get approval for it. Maybe it's only to the two councils, just looking for clarity. So for any future events, they know the process to go through.
Madam Chair, because I think in the past that any event just came to this committee, and actually even in this meeting with the aerobatics competition, it just went to and this committee approved. I think the air tour came more to the council for funding than approval of the event, if I'm correct. But do you just want a policy clarifying where?
Yes.
All right, any other questions or comments? Seeing none, those in favor? That is carried unanimously. Thank you, and I appreciate that. We just want to make this as clear as possible. That brings us to 8.1 and 8.2, May and June reports. Mr. Lindsay, looking forward to hearing how you walk us through those.
Has received the May report that was done by Rob Shanks, Director of Operations and Engineering.
You probably just tell where we're at today.
Yeah, we're at
Yes.
today. Overall, I've been here for about a month now. And when I got here, there were a number of issues at the airport that needed addressing. And most have been addressed as far as operational operations, the way things are working with their lighting issues and whatnot. I've got all the lights working again now that weren't working before. They're not completely fixed and leveled and repaired, but they're all working. The approach lighting, the VASIS lights have been leveled, stabilized, and calibrated, so they're legal again. As far as the house, the basement's been remediated more or less. And they've got a company hired to do some remediation upstairs in the bathroom to do with mold and whatnot in there. And yeah, we're moving forward with operations. I'm getting my feet on the ground and learning what's going on out there and meeting some of the tenants, meeting some of the issues. And we had that, like I said, fly-in day was a huge success from my point of view. That was a bit of a confusing at the beginning because I didn't know what's happening. It went from a simple air tour to a show and shine and this and that, and then council addressing people, but we pulled it off. There's parking issues, which didn't become an issue till the very last second, and then it wasn't really an issue in the end anyways. So overall, that was a great day, I think. I got to meet a lot of people. And yeah, working with the Airbags Club and some of the Rocky Flying Club people, and we're working towards resolution that way as well with their differences and whatnot.
That's great news. And I think that the event process policy, when that report comes back, might help clarify that so that
Yeah.
you don't have as many surprises.
A little heads up.
Yeah. So that'll help a lot. Any questions with regard to that report? And I guess the other question I have is, I didn't realize the house was having problems. It's I assume that's the little airport manager's house.
Yeah.
You're not living in that right now with mold and whatnot. Oh, good. Mr. Kraus,
So,
perhaps you
no,
could-
Madam Chair, just it's been assessed and whatever, it probably needs about $50,000 of repairs. Going, I mean, it's a house built in the 70s with original furnace. We had mold issue downstairs and so forth, so. Administratively, we will do what we can this year with our budget and then bring it forward in the 2022 budget for any other major repair.
Okay. So I'm looking for a motion to accept the airport supervisor's report as information. Counselor Brown, those in favor? And I see empty car seat, so that is carried. Mr. Lindsay, welcome aboard. I think I said it at the last meeting, but truly grateful to have you here and working with us. I know we already got through the correspondence and and I don't believe there's any notices of motion. I'm looking, well, I'm going once, twice, 3 times if I say it quickly. We have no closed session meetings. Before we adjourn, I'm looking for when we can meet next. August, maybe mid-August, 3rd week.
I'm gone almost all of August.
Oh, gosh, that won't work too well then.
No.
Okay, so,
Yeah, August isn't gonna work for me as well. We'll have to bump it into September.
okay, so August is not a good idea. September, it's our our Thursdays working well? Thursday mornings? So how about September the 9th? Okay. Mr. Moore, looks good. We've got, Good.
So Madam Chair,
Councillor.
as you're aware, are actually all of our staff are in emergency management training.
oh,
on the
so
9th.
that may not work so
So,
well. So have you got an alternate date you'd like to recommend in kind of there? We could go to, oh, I bet the 7th is probably a council day.
It's a short week too, not.
Madam Chair, September 16th, the next Thursday.
Or we could go to September the 2nd. Don't go that way. Go to 16. All right. Okay, so 16 is not a good day. Well, hopefully we won't have such a large agenda that it takes 2 days to do. Well, a full day if we go noon to noon twice. So it is September 16th, or would you like an alternate day?
Let's put it in right now.
Okay, September 16th, if we're all very good with that. Do we need a motion to that effect that says that we will be aiming for September the 16th? Yes, so looking for that motion that we'll try to meet on September 16th. Okay, Councillor Ald, those in favor? Thank you, that's carried unanimously. That gives us the opportunity now to finally adjourn this meeting at, what is the time here? 12:15. Thank you to all. I very much appreciate that. All your effort and energies and coming to the meeting today. Be safe.